Many of us know what it's like to have dreams unrealized, hopes unfulfilled, and wonder if we could have done something different. Dean Taylor knows that story, and he took action.
Right before he passed away, a few months before that happened, we were there getting his house ready for sale, and he had this dream of having his own business. He worked on drilling rigs most of his life, and had this desire to do small engine repair, did some training. And I remember him studying and taking tests, and he got this little engine that he would take apart and put back together, and did that many, many times. This is when I was younger, but I don't remember why that business never took off for him. But I remember being so excited that he was doing this, kind of pursuing this dream. And then here we were, in 2018, cleaning out his garage, and I ran across those old manuals and that little engine sitting in the corner.
Oh, wow.
And we were throwing all this stuff away.
Another important DTH conversation you do not want to miss. Let's roll that intro. Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The D-Rate the Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful D-Rate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. My guest this week is Dean Taylor, a man who knows what it feels like to be stuck. Successful on paper, but unfulfilled inside. But instead of staying in that space, Dean took bold, faith-driven action to rediscover his purpose, inspired by the legacy of his late father. Now, with nearly 30 years of leadership in healthcare and a deeply personal journey of transformation, Dean's on a mission to help others break free from the mediocrity and live lives of true abundance. In this episode, we talk about the power of personal accountability, the transformative practice of daily gratitude, and how routines like the miracle morning can radically shift your mindset. Whether you're a working father, a mid-career professional, or someone just seeking more out of life, this conversation is packed with actionable wisdom to help you reignite your dreams and strengthen your relationships, starting from the inside out. This one's from the heart, my friend, so let's jump into it with my friend, Dean Taylor. Here we go. Dean Taylor, thank you so much for joining me here on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. It is great to see you today, man.
Thank you, Wilk. It's a real honor to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to be on your show today.
I am so grateful to have this conversation with you today, Dean. It's one of these things, the D-Rate the Hate podcast started several years ago with me having this idea that bettering the world one attitude at a time. Two of the main principles for me in doing that was gratitude and personal accountability. And when you reached out, Dean, and I saw that that's the language that you speak and in the things that you do, you talk a lot about faith, purpose, gratitude, how we as individuals can do these great things with our lives. And so I saw you were speaking my language, knew I wanted to have a conversation. So again, Dean, grateful that you're here today.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Again, appreciate the opportunity and look forward to our conversation today. I'm sure it will be very good to just for me to be a part of this show as well. So I'm super excited.
So Dean, so let's start with you. When doing a little bit of reading about you and trying to figure out what it is that you do, what your thing was, I saw that you talked about you felt stuck in your career and you just didn't see kind of where you fit in the whole picture and didn't really understand what your purpose was. So let's start there in how you started to realize that gratitude and personal accountability were going to be a thing that would ultimately change your life.
Yes, I've had success in my life. And it wasn't that I wasn't grateful for what I had done in my life. I felt, I think what got me really on this path of discovery is I started thinking about, and I'll just share a quick story. And right before we started recording, my dad passed away in 2018. And right before he passed away, a few months before that happened, we were there getting his house ready for sale. And he had this dream of having his own business. He worked on drilling rigs most of his life and had this desire to do small engine repair, did some training. And I remember him studying and taking tests, and he got this little engine that he would take apart and put back together and did that many, many times. This is when I was younger, but I don't remember why that business never took off for him. But I remember being so excited that he was doing this, kind of pursuing this dream. And then here we were in 2018, cleaning out his garage, and I ran across those old manuals and that little engine sitting in the corner.
Oh, wow.
We were throwing all this stuff away. And I just thought, I'm throwing my dad's dreams. Literally, I felt like I was throwing them in the trash. And it just kind of made me stop and think for a second about, well, what am I doing? Am I really pursuing this, my passion, or what is that for me? And so it was just one of those pivotal moments of my life that just really got me thinking. And I read the book, The Miracle Morning. Some people may have read that book.
Sure.
Maybe you heard about that book. And that was another one of those anchor moment, pivotal points in my life, reading the book and then actually beginning to do the routine and waking up every morning with more purpose in my day and more intention. And I was being very intentional about my own growth. So that was the beginning of this stirring in my soul of change and wanting to really uncover what my purpose and passion for it was and what I was going to do. And as I thought about that, I was thinking, I've had a successful career. I worked as a newborn ICU nurse. I got into healthcare IT administration. Really grateful for all these great experiences, but maybe you can call it a midlife crisis. I'm 56, just turned 56 in April, and this was a few years ago. I was doing all this work and personal development work and thinking about what is it that I'm leaving for my kids behind, and if my kids were looking at me, would they? What legacy am I leaving? Not just in terms of finances or anything like that, but I thought, what is the legacy I'm leaving for them in terms of their own beliefs about accomplishing what they want in life? And so that was just all those things were kind of going through my mind, and that's kind of what got me really thinking and working and journaling. And anyway, it's just been a process over the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years at least, where I've really been very intentional about my life and what I'm doing and what I want to accomplish. And I've realized that my these dreams that I held on or I had when I was little and what I was going to do in life, and some of that stuff, I'm not going to do that now, but I realize that it's never it's always too late to stop dreaming, but it's never too early to start dreaming again.
That's right. That's right.
And,
No, well, first, I want to unpack that a little bit, Dean. But first, let me thank you for sharing the story about your dad, because that the idea of his dream ending up kind of dying on the vine and staying in the corner of the garage only to be found at the end of his life. I mean, it's a heartbreaking story, but it's heartwarming in a way because of what it ultimately ended up doing for you. Now, it makes me think of a phrase: when is the best time to plant an apple tree? 40 years ago, right?
yeah.
When is the second best time? Today. It's one of these things where we can't go back and undo what we missed doing in the past. But if it's our passion, if it's what we really want, then start today. Start today and make something happen. I've recently been fortunate enough, when you talk about passion and you talk about purpose and talk about that legacy, Dean, that you want to leave for your children. What is it that you want them to take away? And I appreciate you separating that from the money or whatever. Inheritance is whatever it is, right? What is it that you want your children to learn? And I'm talking to the DTH listeners here. What is it that you want what is it that you want your children to take away from your life? What is that example that you want to set for them and show them? And I think, well, one of the best ways we can do that is through storytelling, and the story of your father is just absolutely beautiful, Dean, because it can so many people can take so many things away from that, and I think so many people can relate to that and have things in their life that if they look at them and examine them, it really puts things into perspective. I recently, and by the time this episode comes out, Dean, and I told you a little bit about this before we started recording, but by the time this episode comes out, I will have taken this seated on the staff at Braver Angels as the new director of media systems and operations. And when we think about passion and we think about purpose and how we can make a difference and leave a legacy for our children, for me, that has become depolarization work and mindset work. And how do we show people there is a better way to live? And a big part of that for me, too, just like you, is the gratitude and personal accountability. So when we talk about the miracle morning, I know gratitude's a big part of that, especially for you. So let's start to unpack that miracle morning thing and how that works for you, Dean.
Yeah, I read the book, and I first started off with thinking, oh, I'm just doing all the people that may not be familiar. There's the Savers routine. S is for silence. It could be meditation. It could be, for me, it's prayer. I'm a man of faith, and so that's my silence in the morning, is my morning prayers. And then there's affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing or journaling. That's the 6 savers. I thought, I'm just going to pick a couple of those things and start doing them. And so I did that. And after a couple of days, I'm like, oh, something's shifting inside of me here. And then I thought, well, why am I shortchanging myself and not doing all of these things? So after a week, I started doing all 6 of those savers. And it doesn't have, some mornings it's pretty quick. I spend maybe 10 minutes. Other times, if I got a little more time, maybe a half an hour, but somewhere in that range, I just spend time waking up a little bit earlier and just starting my day with real intention. And I began to notice, I just felt so different. I felt more confident. I felt like when I went into encountered things during my day, I could think back on this morning routine. And when I went to bed at night, I always thought I did something today, even if I didn't feel like I did something meaningful. But I know I always start off my day that way. And so that was the beginning for me and this change. And I've since then done a lot of other things to develop myself, reading and implementing things that I've read. And you talked about mindset, and I've just discovered how important the words we say to ourselves, and there's so much dialogue and conversation that happens in our minds, and not all of it's positive. And I've just learned that I quickly realized how many things I was saying about myself that wasn't really helping me to move forward like I wanted to in life. And so I'm very careful now about the words I say about myself.
No, that's right. And that's hugely important. I mean, I think that's the topic that cannot be overstated, because we don't say nearly as many things to, I mean, even people like me or people who have several conversations a day, we don't say nearly as many things to other people as we say to ourselves. and the way we think about ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves, it is so vitally important. And this takes me into another thing that I know that you've brought up before, Dean, is I talk about personal accountability, and I know that that's a part of your thing too, is personal accountability. And then when I think about that, and I see you've talked about, we can't really truly be what we need to be for other people if we aren't that for ourselves. I've had several conversations with a friend of mine, Reggie Wilson, who talks about we can't provide for others if our cup is already empty. And the only way we can fill our cup is by treating ourselves the way that we need to be treated, to be fulfilled. So talk a little bit about that, Dean, in the idea that we really can't be for anybody else unless we are that for ourselves to start with, and how personal accountability plays into that.
I love this. And I would say, when you were talking about and mentioning that, the first thing that came to my mind was a story that I changed. It's not that I changed the story, but the way I view that event in my life is very different. It's a simple thing, but I years ago, I was working for a lawn care company, and I got a ticket for this lady claimed that I made an illegal lane change, and I kind of ran her off the road. And anyway, I tried to fight it and say, oh no, she wasn't paying attention and whatever. Because there in what I remember, there were being two lanes, and I thought I was going back to help her because I saw her actually leave the road, and I stopped and I backed up and I went to make sure she was okay. And so I've always had like kind of this victim story that I was there, and she told a better story than me, and I ended up getting the ticket.
Okay.
And my accountable story of that is, when I go back and actually look, there was actually only one lane, and so I thought I must just not have seen her. I probably didn't really look and notice, and so my point in sharing this story is what I've learned from that story and other things in my life is that I'm always 100% accountable for everything that happens to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if it's something that turned out negative, or someone did something to me that I didn't ask for, whatever it would be, I'm always accountable. And what I mean by that is, I have learned that when I take responsibility for how I respond to that act, whatever it is, that's my accountability part. Like
Yes.
I can make this story and play this victim role, or I can just say, I'm not choosing to go down that path. I'm not going to react this way. I'm going to respond in a different way, in a way that helps me to be happy and just live with clarity. Is the only way I can really think to say that.
Right. Yeah. Viktor Frankl called it the ultimate freedom, right? The
Yes.
ability to choose our response in situations that are outside of our control. And when I think about personal accountability, Dean, I always go back to the idea that in every situation that we are in, there are always going to be things that are outside of our control. Always, always.
Mhm.
And when we play through those things in our mind, or even while we're working through those things, the one thing that we always have is the ability to choose our response. Stephen
Mhm.
Covey talked about it a lot in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, too. Responsibility, ability to choose our response. I've worked with drivers now for several years, Dean, and you bring up that story about, well, I was a driver and I worked with with drivers now for several years in
Yeah.
transportation for 26 years. And one thing that I always go back to in coaching, or when I'm driving myself, or when I'm looking at, when I'm investigating an accident, or whatever the case may be, I always go back to that whole thing of what was happening, what was within my control or within that driver's control, how did they respond to it. There's, like I said, there's always going to be things outside of our control. And you brought up the word clarity. And oftentimes you were recalling the accident and saying you thought there was 2 lanes, but it wasn't until later you realized there was just 1 lane, and it kind of changed the picture. When we find ourselves in that victim mentality, Dean, we often don't see all the different variables. We become blinded to many of the different things that actually happened. That moment of clarity comes when you admit that maybe I was the one at fault. Maybe I need to look at this from all different perspectives and see, was there something that I could have done differently? The thing that I think about in that situation, we can just keep on going on the traffic topic, and then relate it to so many other things in life, is when we realize, okay, the root cause of what happened very well may not have been my fault. But is there anything in that sequence of events that I could have done differently that maybe could have made this situation not turn out as bad as it did? Once we realize that, that moment of clarity comes and says, I could have done something different to change the outcome of this. If nothing else, for me inside here, inside my heart or inside my mind, and walked away from this learning something better than just feeling like a victim. Dive into that a little bit for me, Dean.
Yeah. When you were, one thing I would say that helped me shift my mindset and to start thinking, we've talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to bring this up, was one of the things that really kind of began to shift my mind from a mindset of limitation was the practice of gratitude, and being able to see things in a different way. I think gratitude is such a key to shifting our minds from seeing all the things that we lack and living in a state of fear and feeling anxious, to seeing kind of what you're talking about, seeing things differently from a different, totally different mindset. What could be a better outcome here versus this role is we often play, or I find myself often playing, is I'm a victim of my circumstance. I'm a victim of my upbringing. I'm a victim of all these things and I've often said to myself. And so gratitude has become a daily practice, and not just thinking thankful thoughts, although I think that's definitely a start. I've developed a habit of writing down things I'm actually thankful for, but then why am I thankful for those things? What feelings do I feel about those things what was the appreciation that I feel for them? And then I think kind of probably the highest level of gratitude we can live by is how we give,
Mm-hmm.
and being generous, and trying to think of something I could do each day that would be, how could I give more than maybe someone might expect out of me that day? It doesn't have to be a big thing.
No,
So that's helped me. And I'm not perfect every day at doing that, but I try to make that a daily habit. But I definitely can sense and feel, I feel the difference when I don't practice the gratitude in my daily life. I'm like,
absolutely.
when something's happening in my day, I'm like, what am I missing? Oh yeah, I didn't do this practice today, writing down things. So anyway, I know I kind of rambled there a little bit from what we were talking about, but I just, when you were saying that, I thought that for me has been such a foundational part of being able to change my mind and how I view life situations, how I respond to things, and also how I view myself, and
Yeah,
the kind of things we talked about a little bit about how the things I will say about myself or don't
sure.
say about myself anymore.
Sure. Well, and I think that's hugely important, Dean, when we think about how do we start our day, and I know your morning routine is a hugely important part of what you do, and I think starting that with gratitude or gratitude journaling. I was just having a conversation with somebody today about that and the importance of that, because they were talking about the anxiety they feel and the things that are happening around them that they have, let's say they have a bit of an inability to deal with. And I said, well, what's your morning routine like? What do you do at the
Mm.
beginning of the day? Because sometimes it used to be breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I think there's a lot of debate about that nowadays, and I
Yeah.
think that's a just debate. But I will tell you, when it comes to mindset and personal accountability and how we are going to interact with people, and which is what I want to wrap this up with,
Mm.
is how this whole thing has started to play out for you, Dean, in your interpersonal relationships and the things that you do now. But starting your day the right way, and how vitally important just starting the day off with the right mindset is for that. Let's take that here to kind of bring this whole thing full circle, because I know starting your day with gratitude is much better than starting your day with a big, healthy, robust breakfast, right? But it's starting your day with gratitude changes the way that you start to see things, just as you said, right? Starts to change the way that you are able to interact with others and how you then deal with those things that are outside of your control, and just the way that it makes you feel. Let's round it out there, Dean, and talk about how this shift that you've made over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years has now changed into a life of living with purpose, and a more a life of abundance, let's just say, and how that works for you, and why you think it's so important that others start to think about making that same kind of change.
Yeah, I think in terms of relationships, like it's impacted relationships with my wife, which is for me my most important relationship here on earth. And I'll share one thing that I we just had our anniversary back in May, on May 29th. It was our 32nd anniversary. And so last
God bless you,
year,
man. That's
oh,
wonderful.
thank you. Yeah. So I had this thought last year. I thought, she was actually with me when I bought it, but I bought a journal at the Barnes and Noble bookstore. And she thought I was just buying it for myself, but I was buying it for her. And I spent this past year writing something that I appreciated or admired or was grateful for her that day. So I did that for a year, and I gave that to her on our anniversary this last May.
Beautiful.
So my point in sharing that story is those relationships in my life are so it's affected that relationship, and giving her that, while that was a wonderful gift, the change that occurred in me and how I see when I was very intentional about how I was seeing her every day and the things that she did, that the ripple effect of that relationship and the growth of that relationship began, I feel like, affected all other relationships in my life, whether that be with my children, my grandchildren, at work, and the way that I interact with people, the level of confidence I have in myself, when I talk with people, the way that I know in previous to this transformation of my life, I would have encountered situations at work where I would have just held back and shared something I think that could have been important. There are just so many things like that in my life that I know that my life is, I'm just a different person. The way I present myself, the way I show up, and in life in general, all aspects of my life is completely transformed because of the intentionality I've had about my own developing myself and growth and practicing, and the way that I view situations, being grateful and saying, well, and being in a state of curiosity. Well, why am I behind this person in line today? Is there something here? Is there a reason that I'm actually here today? It's just, there's so many things like that. I've just discovered that just the way that every day and just seeing things, it's just helped me to be more positive about every other aspect of my life.
It's hugely important, Dean, how we feel about ourselves, what we put out into the world is what comes back to us, and whether it be just that clarity that we find in understanding that we may not have dealt with a situation in the right way, so we might need to rethink it. Certainty often stands in the way of clarity. And this conversation has been wonderful. I'm grateful for you, Dean, and the work that you're doing. And I would love for the DTH listeners to learn more about you. So the website, again, is deantaylorofficial.com. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
DeanTaylorofficial.com. They can find out more about the work that you're doing, Dean, and just the stories that you've told here today, Dean, are just, they're heartwarming. They mean a lot. There's lessons in them that people can take away, actionable items that mean so much in how we interact with the world. And I'm thank you so much. I'm grateful for you, Dean.
I likewise so grateful to be a part of your great show. I love the work you're doing, and you're blessing lives exactly as you say, one attitude at a time. So great job. I love it.
Thank you so much. Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together, so please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.